The sharp crack of a rifle shot echoed across the snow-covered valley, and Samuel Winchester knew he had maybe 10 minutes before the men tracking him caught up. Blood seeped through the makeshift bandage on his left arm where a bullet had grazed him during his escape from the mining camp. But he pushed his horse harder through the drifts, squinting against the blinding white that surrounded him on all sides. It was December 1883, and the Nevada mountains had turned treacherous with an early winter storm that showed no signs of letting up. The gelding beneath him snorted with exhaustion, its breath forming clouds in the frigid air, but Samuel had no choice except to keep moving. Behind him, 3 hired guns from the Silver Peak Mining Company wanted him dead for what he had witnessed, and ahead of him lay nothing but wilderness and the slim hope of reaching Goldfield before nightfall. The snow fell in thick curtains now, reducing visibility to barely 20 feet. Samuel's fingers had gone numb inside his leather gloves, and ice crystals clung to his dark beard. He had been working as a surveyor for the mining company, documenting their claims and mapping the territory, when he stumbled upon their secret. The company executives were deliberately flooding competitor mines and causing cave-ins to eliminate competition. He had seen them plant explosives, watched them redirect underground streams, and when they discovered he knew their methods, they sent their best killers after him with orders to make sure he never testified. A sound cut through the howling wind, so faint he almost missed it. Samuel pulled hard on the reins, bringing his horse to a halt. There it was again, a human voice, weak and trembling. He turned his head, trying to locate the source through the swirling snow. His every instinct screamed at him to keep riding, to put as much distance as possible between himself and his pursuers, but the sound came again. Someone was crying. Samuel dismounted, his boots sinking into snow that came up past his knees. He tied his horse to a twisted juniper and moved toward the sound, his right hand resting on the pistol at his hip. The crying grew louder as he pushed through a stand of snow-laden pines. Then he saw her. A woman sat huddled against the trunk of a massive ponderosa pine, her arms wrapped around her knees, her whole body shaking with cold and sobs. Her dress was torn and soaked through, her dark hair hung in frozen strands around her pale face, and her lips had taken on a dangerous blue tint. She wore no coat, no proper shoes, nothing that would protect anyone from this deadly weather. "Madam," Samuel called out, approaching slowly with his hands visible. "Madam, can you hear me?" Her head lifted, and he found himself looking into the most striking green eyes he had ever seen, though they were red-rimmed from crying and clouded with the early stages of hypothermia. She tried to speak, but her teeth chattered too violently for words to form. She looked young, maybe 22 or 23, with delicate features that spoke of a sheltered upbringing now shattered by whatever circumstances had left her dying in the snow. Samuel did not hesitate. He shrugged out of his heavy wool coat, the same one that had kept him alive through countless nights on the range, and wrapped it around her trembling shoulders. The cold bit through his shirt immediately, but he ignored it as he knelt beside her in the snow. "What is your name?" he asked gently, rubbing her arms through the coat to generate warmth. "What happened to you, Annabelle?" she managed through chattering teeth. "Annabelle Zimmerman, they left me." Rage flared hot in Samuel's chest despite the cold. "Who left you out here? My husband, his men." Fresh tears spilled down her frozen cheeks. "He said I was worthless, said the desert would be my grave, but we were traveling through the mountains when the storm hit. He just told them to ride on and leave me behind." Samuel's jaw clenched. He had seen cruelty in his 31 years, had witnessed the worst of what men could do to each other in this harsh land, but abandoning a woman in a blizzard reached a new depth of depravity. He looked back through the trees toward where he had left his horse. His pursuers could not be far behind now, but this woman would be dead within the hour if he left her here. "Can you stand?" he asked, already knowing the answer. Her legs were bare below the knees where her dress had torn away, and her feet were wrapped in nothing but the remains of what had once been fine leather shoes. Frostbite had likely already set in. When she tried to move, her legs buckled. Samuel caught her before she collapsed into the snow. Without another word, he lifted her into his arms. She weighed almost nothing, and he could feel her bones through the thin fabric of her dress. How long had she been out here? How long since she had eaten? "I am going to get you somewhere safe," Samuel said, looking down into her frightened eyes. "I promise you that. Nobody is going to leave you behind again. You have my word on that." Something flickered in her expression. Hope, maybe, or perhaps just the desperate gratitude of someone who had accepted death and suddenly found a reprieve. She nodded weakly and let her head rest against his chest as he carried her back to his horse. Getting them both mounted took some maneuvering, especially with his wounded arm protesting every movement. But Samuel managed to settle Annabelle in front of him on the saddle, keeping one arm wrapped securely around her waist. He could feel her shivering against him, could hear the shallow rasp of her breathing. She needed shelter, warmth, dry clothes, and medical attention, none of which he could provide out here in this wilderness with armed men on his trail. "There is a lined shack about 5 miles northeast," Samuel said, more to himself than to her. "Used to stop there when I was working this territory. Should still have some supplies if the weather has not gotten to them." He urged his horse forward, choosing his path carefully. 5 miles might as well be 50 in these conditions, but it was their only chance. The wind picked up as they rode, driving snow into their faces with stinging force. Samuel kept his body bent protectively over Annabelle, trying to shield her from the worst of it. She had stopped shivering, which worried him more than anything else. That was one of the final stages before hypothermia killed. Her breathing had grown slower, more labored. "Stay with me," he said urgently, giving her a gentle shake. "Annabelle, you have to stay awake. Talk to me. Tell me about yourself." "So cold," she whispered. "Cannot feel anything anymore." "I know, but you have to fight it. Come on, talk to me." "Where are you from?" "Boston," she murmured. "Came west last year. Thought it would be an adventure." "Some adventure," Samuel said grimly. "What brought you out here?" "Marriage." The word came out bitter. "Father arranged it. Said Marcus Zimmerman was a successful businessman, said I would want for nothing." She laughed, but it turned into a cough. "He failed to mention Marcus was a monster. Failed to mention that business meant running weapons to whoever would pay, Indian tribes and outlaws alike. Failed to mention that Marcus already had 2 other wives hidden away in different territories." Samuel's grip on her tightened. "Did he hurt you?" "Every day," she whispered. "But today, when I confronted him about the other wives, when I threatened to write my father and tell him everything, Marcus decided it would be easier to just be rid of me. We were traveling from Silver Peak to Goldfield when the storm hit. He ordered his men to ride ahead, told me to get down from the wagon to adjust my shoe. By the time I turned around, they were all galloping away. I ran after them, screaming, begging. I fell so many times, lost my shoes, tore my dress on the rocks. Eventually, I could not run anymore, so I found that tree and sat down to wait for death." "You are not dying today," Samuel said firmly. "I am going to make sure of that." Another rifle shot cracked through the air, this one much closer than before. Samuel cursed under his breath and urged his horse faster, though the poor animal was already struggling through the deep snow. His pursuers had caught up sooner than he expected. They must have pushed their mounts hard to close the distance so quickly. Who are those men? Annabelle asked, some awareness creeping back into her voice as adrenaline cut through the hypothermia's fog. People who want me dead, Samuel said shortly. I saw something I should not have seen. Made the mistake of having a conscience about it. Seems we both made powerful enemies, she said with a ghost of a smile. Seems that way. The line shack appeared through the snow like a miracle, a small wooden structure built into the side of a rocky outcropping. Samuel had never been so relieved to see anything in his life. He brought the horse right up to the door before dismounting, then carefully lifted Annabelle down. She could barely stand on her own, so he kept one arm around her as he kicked the door open. The interior was cold and dark, but it was shelter from the wind and snow. A small pot-bellied stove sat in one corner, and miracle of miracles, there was still a supply of firewood stacked against the wall. Someone had restocked it recently, probably another surveyor or a line rider checking the high country. Samuel settled Annabelle onto the single cot, which was covered in thick wool blankets that smelled of cedar and smoke. Then he went to work on the stove, his cold, numbed fingers fumbling with matches until finally, blessedly, a flame caught. He fed kindling into the stove, then larger pieces of wood, until a proper fire was crackling inside. Heat began to radiate outward, and Samuel could have wept with relief. "We need to get you out of those wet clothes," he said, turning back to Annabelle. Her eyes were barely open, but she nodded weakly. Samuel searched the shack and found an old trunk in the corner. Inside were some spare clothes, men's mostly, but there was a thick flannel shirt and wool pants that would work. There was also a tin of what looked like beans, some coffee, and a bottle of whiskey. He helped Annabelle sit up, then turned his back to give her privacy while he held the clothes out behind him. "Can you manage?" I will try." He heard her struggling with the wet fabric, heard her whimper in pain as her frozen fingers refused to cooperate. After a minute, she spoke again, her voice small and embarrassed. "I cannot do it. My hands will not work properly." Samuel took a deep breath, keeping his eyes averted. "I am going to help you, but I give you my word as a gentleman that I will not take advantage. I am only doing this to save your life. Do you understand?" "Yes," she whispered. Moving with as much clinical detachment as he could muster, Samuel helped her out of the soaked dress and undergarments, then quickly dressed her in the dry clothes. He kept his eyes focused on the task, refusing to let his gaze wander, though he could not help but notice the bruises that covered her arms and ribs. Fresh anger at Marcus Zimmerman burned through him. Once she was dressed, he wrapped her in every blanket he could find and settled her close to the stove. Then he examined her feet, which were a worrying shade of white and purple. He rubbed them gently, trying to restore circulation, all while keeping his touch professional and careful. "This is going to hurt when the feeling comes back," he warned. "Probably going to hurt like hellfire, but that is a good sign. Means the tissue is not dead." "Nothing could hurt worse than freezing to death," she said, but her voice was already stronger. The warmth from the stove and the dry clothes were working their magic. Samuel tended his own wound next, cleaning it as best he could with snow water heated on the stove and a strip of cloth from his spare shirt. The bullet had only grazed him, but it still needed attention. As he worked, he could feel Annabelle watching him. "Why did you stop for me?" she asked quietly. "You were running from those men. You could have kept going, should have kept going." Samuel tied off the bandage and looked at her. Even bedraggled and half frozen, with her hair in tangles and her face still pale, she was beautiful. But more than that, there was something in her eyes, a strength that had not been broken despite everything she had endured. "Could not leave you there," he said simply. "Would not be able to live with myself if I had. You do not even know me. Does not matter. What matters is that you needed help, and I was there to give it." He moved to the window and carefully peered out through the grimy glass. Snow continued to fall in heavy sheets, and visibility was near zero. Besides, this storm is going to cover our tracks. Those men will not be able to find us until it clears, and by then we will be long gone. "Where will we go?" "Goldfield first, to get you properly looked after by a doctor. Then I need to get to Carson City. I have evidence about what the Silver Peak Mining Company has been doing, documents I managed to steal before I ran. The territorial governor needs to see them." Annabelle pulled the blankets tighter around herself. "And what about Marcus?" "He still thinks I am his wife." "We will deal with that too," Samuel said. "One problem at a time. First priority is keeping both of us alive through the night." He put coffee on to boil and opened the tin of beans, which turned out to be nearly full. Not much of a meal, but it would keep them going. As the coffee percolated and the beans heated, the shack slowly transformed from a frozen box into something almost cozy. The storm raged outside, but inside they had warmth and shelter and, for the moment, safety. Samuel poured coffee into 2 tin cups and handed one to Annabelle, then sat down on the floor near the stove with his own cup and a portion of the beans. She ate slowly at first, as if she had forgotten how, but then with more enthusiasm as her body remembered its hunger. "Tell me about yourself," she said after a while. "You know my whole tragic story. What is yours?" Samuel considered the question. "Not much to tell. Born in Kansas, raised on a cattle ranch until the war came. Fought with the Union, saw more death than any man should have to see. Afterward, I came west looking for something different. Worked as a scout, a lawman for a while, then took up surveying because it paid well and kept me outdoors. Never married, never stayed in one place too long." He took a sip of his coffee. "Guess I have been running from something my whole life. Just took me until now to realize it. Running from what? Myself, maybe. The memories. The guilt of being alive when so many good men died in that war." He stared into his cup. "Sounds foolish when I say it out loud." "It does not sound foolish," Annabelle said softly. "It sounds honest. Most men would never admit to such things." They sat in companionable silence for a while, listening to the wind howl around the shack. The warmth and food and coffee were working their healing magic on both of them. Color had returned to Annabelle's cheeks, and her hands had stopped shaking. Samuel's wounded arm still throbbed, but the bleeding had stopped and the pain had dulled to a manageable ache. "Why did you promise to keep me safe?" Annabelle asked suddenly. "You could have just brought me here and left me with the supplies. Could have gone on your way without the burden of another person to worry about." Samuel met her eyes across the small space. "Because when I make a promise, I keep it. My word is all I have got in this world, and I would rather die than break it. I told you nobody would leave you behind again, and I meant it. We are in this together now, whether either of us planned it or not." Something shifted in her expression, a softening around the eyes, a slight upturn of her lips that was not quite a smile but close. "I believe you," she said. "I do not know why, since I have known you for all of 2 hours, but I believe you." "That is a start," Samuel said. The night deepened around them as the storm continued its assault. Samuel kept the fire fed and the coffee hot while Annabelle dozed fitfully on the cot, occasionally crying out from nightmares. Each time she did, he moved to her side and spoke softly until she settled again. He did not sleep himself, keeping watch at the window for any sign of his pursuers, though he knew the storm would keep them at bay for now. As dawn approached, the snow finally began to ease. The wind died down from a roar to a whisper, and thin gray light filtered through the clouds. Samuel had been awake for nearly 36 hours straight, and exhaustion dragged at his bones, but they needed to move. This shack was known to other surveyors and ranchers. It would only be a matter of time before someone checked it. "Annabelle," he said gently, touching her shoulder. "Time to wake up. We need to get moving." She came awake with a start, eyes wide and frightened until she focused on his face and remembered where she was. "Is it morning?" "Such as it is. Storm has passed, but there is fresh snow everywhere. Should slow down anyone trying to track us, but it will slow us down too." He had already been outside to check on his horse, which had weathered the night under the small overhang on the shack's east side. The animal was tired but sound, and Samuel had fed it the last of the grain he carried in his saddlebags. They ate the remaining beans cold and drank more coffee, then prepared to leave. Samuel helped Annabelle into his coat again, though he found an old canvas duster in the trunk that he could wear. It was not as warm as his wool coat, but it would serve. He also found some leather gloves for her and fashioned makeshift boots from canvas and leather strips to protect her damaged feet. "It is about 20 miles to Goldfield," he said as he helped her onto the horse. "Going to take us most of the day in this snow, maybe longer." "You think you can make it?" "I do not have much choice, do I?" she said, but there was determination in her voice now, not just resignation. Surviving the night had given her back some of her fight. They set out into a transformed landscape. The storm had buried everything under 2 feet of fresh powder, turning the rugged Nevada mountains into a wonderland of white. The sky had cleared to a pale blue, and the sun reflected off the snow with blinding intensity. Samuel navigated by memory and by the position of the sun, guiding his horse down from the high country toward the valley where Goldfield lay. The going was slow and treacherous. Several times the horse stumbled in hidden drifts or on ice-slicked rocks. Samuel kept one arm wrapped securely around Annabelle's waist, acutely aware of her warmth against him, of the way her hair smelled faintly of pine and snow. He tried not to think about how right it felt to hold her, how natural it seemed despite the circumstances of their meeting. Around midday, they stopped to rest the horse and share some jerky and hardtack Samuel had in his saddlebags. They stood on a ridge overlooking the valley, and in the distance, Annabelle could see the scattered buildings of Goldfield spread out below them. "Is it a big town?" she asked. "Bigger than most out here. Got maybe 2,000 people last I heard and growing every day with the mining boom. Got a proper hotel, a doctor, even a telegraph office." Samuel chewed his jerky thoughtfully. "Your husband, does he know about Goldfield? Would he think to look for you there?" Annabelle considered this. "We were headed that way, so yes, he knows of it. But he thinks I am dead in the snow. I do not believe it would occur to him to search the town." "Unless he runs into his men from the mining company," Samuel said. "Silver Peak does business in Goldfield. If word gets out that I am there, Marcus might hear about it and start asking questions. Then what do? We go in quiet, get you seen by the doctor, get you some proper clothes and supplies. I will send my evidence to Carson City by telegraph and private courier. Then we get out of town before anyone knows we were there." He looked at her seriously. "But there is something you need to know. If you are still legally married to Marcus Zimmerman, things get complicated. He has rights under the law, even if he is a scoundrel." "Then I need to end the marriage," Annabelle said firmly. "I need a divorce. That takes time and money and lawyers, not something we can arrange on the run." "Then what do you suggest?" Samuel was quiet for a long moment. "I suggest we stay alive first and worry about the legal details later. One step at a time." They pressed on, and by late afternoon they reached the outskirts of Goldfield. The town sprawled across the valley floor in a haphazard collection of wooden buildings, tents, and half-finished structures. Smoke rose from countless chimneys, and even from a distance they could hear the sounds of industry. Hammers on anvils, the rumble of ore wagons, men shouting. It was a rough place, a mining town in the full flush of a boom where fortunes were made and lost daily and violence was as common as dust. Samuel guided them to a boarding house on the edge of town, a modest two-story structure run by a widow named Mrs. Henderson. He had stayed there before during his surveying work, and he knew the woman to be discreet and honest. He paid for 2 rooms with some of the gold coins he kept sewn into his belt, then helped Annabelle upstairs while Mrs. Henderson looked on with curious but knowing eyes. "The lady needs a bath and some proper clothes," Samuel told the widow. "She has been through an ordeal." "I can see that, Mrs. Henderson said, her weathered face kind. "I will heat water and bring up what I have. She is about my daughter's size, and she left some dresses here when she married and moved to Sacramento." Within an hour, Annabelle was ensconced in a copper tub full of hot water in her room while Samuel stood guard outside in the hallway. Mrs. Henderson had provided soap and towels and a simple but clean dress of blue calico. Samuel could hear the soft splash of water from inside the room and tried not to picture what Annabelle looked like in that tub, tried not to think about the curve of her neck or the way her eyes caught the light. He was developing feelings for her, he realized with something like alarm. Dangerous, complicated feelings that had no place in their current situation. She was married, however unhappily. She was vulnerable and traumatized. He had known her for less than a day. None of this mattered to his treacherous heart, which had decided on its own that Annabelle Zimmerman was someone special, someone worth protecting, someone worth caring about. When she emerged from her room an hour later, Samuel had to catch his breath. The bath and clean clothes had transformed her. Her dark hair was still damp but combed and braided over one shoulder. The blue dress fit her well, and the color brought out the green in her eyes. She looked young and lovely and far too innocent for the harsh world they inhabited. "Better?" he asked, his voice coming out rougher than he intended. "Much," she said with a real smile, the first he had seen from her. It lit up her whole face. "I almost feel human again. You look—" Samuel stopped himself. "You look recovered, that is good. We should get you to a doctor now, have those feet looked at properly." The town doctor was a gruff man named Patterson, who had seen everything in his years on the frontier and was not easily surprised. He examined Annabelle's feet with gentle hands despite his stern demeanor, then bandaged them with salve and clean wrappings. "You will heal," he told her. "Came close to losing a few toes, but you got lucky. Keep those bandages clean and dry. Stay off your feet as much as possible for the next few days. No permanent damage if you are careful." Samuel paid the doctor and then took Annabelle to the general store, where he bought her proper boots, a warm coat, and some additional clothes. He also bought supplies for the trail, food, ammunition, a bedroll. The clerk wrapped everything up and never asked questions, which was one of the things Samuel appreciated about frontier merchants. They understood that sometimes people needed discretion more than they needed conversation. It was evening by the time they returned to the boarding house, and Samuel was swaying on his feet with exhaustion. He had not slept in 2 days, and his wounded arm throbbed with every heartbeat. Mrs. Henderson took one look at him and insisted he eat a proper meal before he collapsed. They sat at her dining table with 2 other boarders, a prospector and a freight wagon driver, both of whom were too interested in their own problems to pay much attention to the newcomers. The food was simple but plentiful: beef stew, fresh bread, apple pie. Samuel ate mechanically, barely tasting it, while Annabelle sat beside him and made polite conversation with Mrs. Henderson about the town and its prospects. After dinner, Samuel walked Annabelle to her room. They stood in the hallway, suddenly awkward with each other now that the immediate danger had passed and they were clean and fed and safe. "Thank you," Annabelle said quietly, "for everything. You saved my life and you have asked nothing in return. I do not know how I will ever repay you." "You do not need to repay me," Samuel said. "I did what any decent person would do." "No," she said firmly. "Most people would have ridden past. Most people would have chosen their own safety over a stranger's life. You did not. That means something." They stood close in the narrow hallway, and Samuel found himself very aware of her presence, of the faint scent of lavender soap, of the way the lamplight caught in her eyes. Without thinking, he reached out and tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. She did not pull away. Instead, she leaned slightly into his touch, her eyes searching his face. "Samuel," she whispered, and the way she said his name made his chest tight. "I should go," he said, though he did not move. "You need rest, and I need to figure out our next move." "Stay," she said. "Just for a minute. I do not want to be alone yet." So he stayed, leaning against the doorframe while she sat on the edge of her bed, and they talked quietly about nothing important. She told him about Boston, about the garden she used to tend at her father's house, about the books she loved to read. He told her about the Kansas prairie, about learning to track game with his grandfather, about the first time he saw the Rocky Mountains and felt like he had finally found where he belonged. Eventually, her eyes started to droop, and Samuel insisted she sleep. He retreated to his own room, which was small and sparse but clean. He removed his boots and gun belt, then lay down on the bed without bothering to undress further. Sleep claimed him immediately, deep and dreamless. He woke to someone pounding on his door. Sunlight streamed through the window, indicating he had slept through the night and well into the morning. Samuel grabbed his pistol and moved to the door, opening it cautiously. Mrs. Henderson stood there, her face pale and worried. "There are men asking about you downstairs," she whispered urgently. "3 of them, rough-looking types. They are asking if anyone has seen a man matching your description, said they have business with you." Samuel's blood ran cold. "Are they still there?" "Yes, drinking coffee in the dining room." "I told them I had not seen anyone like that, but I do not think they believed me. They are watching the stairs." "Where is Annabelle?" "Still in her room as far as I know." "What is this about, Mr. Winchester? Are you in some kind of trouble?" "The kind that could get you hurt if you are not careful," Samuel said honestly. "I am sorry, Mrs. Henderson. I should not have brought this to your door." Little late for apologies. "What are you going to do?" Samuel thought quickly. "Is there a back way out? Kitchen door leads to the alley." "But if they are watching the house, they will have someone covering it." "Maybe, maybe not. They do not know for certain I am here." He moved back into his room and gathered his things, strapping on his gun belt and pulling on his boots. Then he knocked softly on Annabelle's door. She opened it immediately, already dressed. "I heard voices. What is happening? We need to leave. Now." He kept his voice low and calm. "The men who were chasing me found the boarding house. We are going out the back." To her credit, Annabelle did not panic or waste time with questions. She simply nodded and reached for her coat. Samuel led her down the back stairs to the kitchen, where Mrs. Henderson was waiting with a bundle of food. "For the trail," the widow said, pressing it into Samuel's hands. "Be careful, both of you." "Thank you," Samuel said. "You are a good woman." "Good enough to keep my mouth shut for a few more minutes before I discover you are gone." She gave them a meaningful look. "Now get out of here before I change my mind." They slipped out the kitchen door into a narrow alley piled with snow and refuse. Samuel drew his pistol and moved carefully toward the street, checking both directions. He spotted one of the gunmen standing near a hitching post, watching the front of the boarding house, but the man's back was turned. "This way," Samuel whispered, and they moved in the opposite direction, keeping to the shadows and back ways. His horse was stabled at the livery on the far side of town, but they could not risk going there directly. Instead, Samuel led them through a maze of alleys and back lots, always moving, always checking behind them. They were 3 blocks from the boarding house when someone shouted. Samuel risked a glance back and saw all 3 gunmen running toward them, weapons drawn. So much for stealth. "Run," he told Annabelle, and they ran. The streets of Goldfield were busy with morning traffic, miners heading to their claims, merchants opening shops, freight wagons rumbling through. Samuel and Annabelle wove through the crowds, using every bit of cover they could find. Behind them, the gunmen shouted for them to stop, which only made the crowds thicker as curious onlookers clogged the street. A bullet whined past Samuel's ear and shattered a window. Someone screamed. The crowd scattered in all directions, people diving for cover. Samuel pulled Annabelle down behind a water trough, returning fire with his pistol. His shot went wide, but it made the gunmen take cover behind a wagon. "We are not going to make it to the livery," Annabelle said, breathing hard. "I know." Samuel scanned the street desperately. Then he saw it. A freight wagon loaded with supplies, the driver climbing up to the seat. "Come on." They ran for the wagon. Samuel boosted Annabelle up into the back, then hauled himself up after her just as the driver snapped the reins. The wagon lurched forward. The gunmen opened fire again, bullets punching through the canvas cover and thudding into the wooden sides. "Keep your head down," Samuel shouted, pushing Annabelle flat against the wagon bed. He fired back through the canvas, more to keep the gunmen pinned than with any real hope of hitting them. The wagon driver, realizing he was caught in the middle of a gunfight, whipped his horses into a gallop. The wagon careened through the streets of Goldfield, bouncing over ruts and taking corners dangerously fast. Samuel held onto Annabelle with one hand and the wagon's side with the other, his wounded arm screaming in protest. They burst out of town onto the open road heading south. Samuel risked a look back and saw the 3 gunmen mounting horses, preparing to give chase. But then something else caught his eye. A larger group of riders was coming into town from the north, maybe 8 or 10 men, and at their head rode someone in an expensive coat and hat. Even from this distance, even after just hearing Annabelle describe him, Samuel recognized Marcus Zimmerman. The man sat his horse like he owned the world, and his face was twisted in fury as he spotted the fleeing wagon. "That is him," Annabelle said, her voice shaking. She had seen him too. "That is Marcus. He found me. He knows I am alive." "We need to get off this road," Samuel said. He leaned forward and shouted to the driver. "Sir, we need you to stop and let us off." The driver, a grizzled old-timer with a face like leather, glanced back at them. "Not until you tell me what in blazes is going on and why there are men shooting at my wagon. It is complicated. I bet it is." But the driver pulled the horses to a halt. They were maybe 2 miles out of Goldfield now, the road cutting through rocky terrain dotted with Joshua trees and scrub brush. "This is as far as I take you. I got a delivery to make in Tanapa, and I am not getting killed over someone else's problems." "Fair enough," Samuel said. He helped Annabelle down from the wagon, then jumped down himself. "Appreciate the ride." "You two better run," the driver said, looking back toward town. "Those riders will be here in a few minutes, and they do not look friendly." Samuel and Annabelle scrambled off the road and into the rocks. The terrain here was rough and broken, cut through with small canyons and dry washes. It would be hard going on foot, especially with Annabelle's injured feet, but it also offered countless places to hide. They heard the riders coming before they saw them, the thunder of hooves on the frozen road. Samuel pulled Annabelle into a narrow cleft between 2 boulders, both of them pressing back into the shadows. His heart hammered against his ribs as the riders passed their hiding spot, Marcus Zimmerman's voice carrying clearly in the cold air. "Find them. I want my wife back, and I want that surveyor dead. $10 gold to whoever brings me his head." The riders fanned out, some continuing down the road after the freight wagon, others turning to search the rocks. Samuel counted 13 men in total, far too many to fight. He and Annabelle would have to stay hidden and hope the searchers moved on. For 2 hours they crouched in that narrow space, barely daring to breathe as riders passed within feet of their hiding spot. Samuel kept his pistol ready, knowing that if they were discovered he would have to fight, would have to try to give Annabelle a chance to run. But luck stayed with them. The searchers eventually gave up and rode back toward Goldfield, leaving behind only the cold wind and the vast empty landscape. "You think they are gone," Annabelle whispered, "for now, but they will keep looking." Samuel helped her stand, wincing as his cramped muscles protested. "We need to put distance between us and this place. Question is, where do we go? You said you needed to get your evidence to Carson City. That was before your husband showed up with an army. Carson City is north, which means going back through Goldfield or taking a long detour around the mountains. Either way, it is risky." He thought for a moment. "There is another option, Austin, about 80 miles east. It is a bigger town, got law enforcement that is not in the mining company's pocket. We could hole up there, send word to Carson City by telegraph. 80 miles on foot, we will find horses. There are ranches scattered through this country, homesteads. Someone will have animals they would be willing to sell or trade." He touched her shoulder gently. "Can you walk?" "I can walk," she said with more confidence than he suspected she felt. "I am not going to slow you down, Samuel. I promise." They set out across country, avoiding the road and sticking to the rough terrain where riders would have difficulty following. The sun climbed higher, offering little warmth but plenty of glare off the snow. Samuel led them east by northeast, navigating by the sun and his memory of the land. Around midday, they found a stream running through a small canyon and stopped to rest and drink. Samuel shared out the food Mrs. Henderson had given them: bread, cheese, dried apples. It was not much, but it helped. As they ate, Annabelle looked at him with an expression he could not quite read. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "You could leave me somewhere safe, go on your own, you would move faster without me. We have been over this. No, I mean really. Why?" She leaned forward, her green eyes intense. "You do not know me. I am just some woman you found in the snow. I am married to a dangerous man, which makes me dangerous too. Every minute you spend with me puts you at greater risk. So why?" Samuel was quiet for a long moment, choosing his words carefully. "At first, it was just about doing the right thing, helping someone who needed help. But somewhere between that pine tree and here, it became about more than that. You are not just some woman I found. You are brave and strong, and you deserve better than what life has given you. And maybe, if I am being honest, I am tired of running alone. Tired of keeping everyone at arm's length because I am afraid of getting hurt or hurting them. When I look at you, I see someone worth fighting for, worth staying for." Annabelle's eyes had gone bright with unshed tears. "Samuel, I am still married. Even if Marcus is a monster, even if he tried to kill me, legally I am still his wife. I have no right to feel what I am starting to feel for you. And what are you feeling?" His voice had gone low and rough. She reached out and took his hand, her fingers cold against his. "Like maybe I found something worth surviving for. Like maybe the worst day of my life led to the best thing that ever happened to me. Is that crazy? If it is, then we are both crazy." He squeezed her hand gently. "Annabelle, I know the timing is wrong. I know everything about this situation is complicated and dangerous and probably foolish. but I need you to know that I am not going to abandon you. Whatever happens, whatever we have to face, we face it together. That promise I made in the snow, I meant every word." "I know you did," she said softly. "That is what scares me. I am not used to people keeping their promises." They sat there in the canyon, hands clasped, and Samuel felt something shift between them. It was not just gratitude or shared danger anymore. It was something deeper, something real. He wanted to kiss her, wanted it so badly his chest ached with it, but he held back. She was right about the timing. She needed time to heal, time to be free of Marcus Zimmerman, time to figure out who she was outside of fear and survival. But someday, he promised himself. Someday, when this was all over and they were safe and she was truly free, he would kiss her and tell her everything he was feeling. Until then, he would be patient. He would be her protector, her friend, whatever she needed him to be. They traveled through the afternoon, making slow but steady progress. The terrain gradually changed from rocky canyons to rolling hills covered in sagebrush and scattered juniper. As the sun began to sink toward the western horizon, they spotted a small ranch nestled in a valley, smoke rising from its chimney. "Think they will help us?" Annabelle asked. "Only one way to find out." They approached cautiously, and a woman emerged from the ranch house with a rifle in her hands. She was middle-aged and weathered, with gray streaks in her brown hair and the wary eyes of someone who had learned to be careful. "That is close enough," she called out when they were still 50 feet away. "State your business." "We are travelers," Samuel said, keeping his hands visible. "We ran into some trouble back in Goldfield and need to get to Austin. We were hoping we might buy or trade for horses and supplies." The woman looked them over carefully, her gaze lingering on Annabelle's bandaged feet and Samuel's makeshift bandage. "What kind of trouble?" "The kind that involves armed men and people who should not be walking free," Samuel said honestly. "We are not criminals, madam. I have evidence of corruption by the Silver Peak Mining Company that I need to get to the territorial authorities, and this lady escaped from a husband who tried to murder her. We just need help getting to safety." The woman was silent for a long moment, then lowered her rifle. "Name is Catherine Weston. My husband died 3 years back and I run this place with my 2 sons. They are out checking fence line right now, but they will be back before dark." She gestured toward the house. "Come on inside. You look half frozen and completely exhausted. We will talk about horses after you have had food and rest." Catherine's ranch house was small but comfortable, with a large fireplace and furniture that showed years of hard use but careful maintenance. She fed them stew and coffee while they told her more of their story. By the time they finished, her expression had gone from wary to sympathetic. "I know Marcus Zimmerman," she said grimly. "He came through here 2 months back, tried to buy my land. When I refused to sell, he had his men rustle 20 head of my cattle. Sheriff in Goldfield would not do anything about it because Zimmerman pays him off. I am not surprised to hear he is capable of murder." "Then you will help us?" Samuel asked. "I will sell you 2 horses and supplies for a fair price. More than that, I will tell you about a trail that cuts through the mountains toward Austin. It is rough going, but it will keep you off the main roads where Zimmerman's men will be looking." She refilled their coffee cups. "You should rest here tonight. Leave at first light. My boys can guide you to the trail head." They accepted gratefully. Catherine showed Annabelle to a small bedroom, and Samuel made himself comfortable on a couch near the fire. He was so tired he could barely think straight, but he forced himself to stay awake until Catherine's sons returned from their fence-line patrol. They were strapping young men in their early 20s, and they listened to their mother's explanation with serious expressions before agreeing to help. "We heard about the trouble with the mining company. the older one, whose name was Tom, told Samuel. They have been trying to squeeze out all the small operators, independent ranchers and prospectors. If you have evidence that can stop them, we want to help. Samuel showed them the documents he carried in his saddlebag, carefully wrapped in oilcloth to protect them from the weather. There were contracts, telegrams, handwritten notes outlining illegal activities. Tom and his brother James examined them with growing anger. "This is enough to put a dozen men in prison," James said. "Maybe more. The territorial governor needs to see this." "That is the plan," Samuel said. "Soon as we get somewhere safe enough to send it." He finally allowed himself to sleep, though his dreams were troubled, full of gunfire and snow and Annabelle's face. He woke several times to check the windows, half expecting to see riders approaching with torches, but the night remained quiet. When morning came, he felt marginally more human, though his wounded arm was still stiff and sore. Catherine prepared a huge breakfast while her sons saddled two good horses, a bay gelding and a sorrel mare. They packed saddlebags with food, blankets, ammunition, everything Samuel and Annabelle would need for the journey to Austin. When it came time to settle up, Samuel tried to pay Catherine more than she asked, but she refused to take it. "Just get that evidence to the authorities," she said. "Make those bastards pay for what they have done. That is payment enough." Tom and James rode with them for the first few miles, showing them the trail that wound through the mountains. It was narrow and steep in places, but it was also well hidden, used primarily by hunters and trappers who knew the backcountry. "Follow this trail for about 40 miles, Tom explained. "It will bring you down into the valley near a place called Berlin. From there, it is another 30 miles or so to Austin on good roads. Should take you 3, maybe 4 days if the weather holds." They parted ways at the top of a ridge, and Samuel and Annabelle continued on alone. The trail was everything Tom had promised, challenging but passable. The horses Catherine had sold them were sure-footed and steady, and they made good progress through the morning. Around midday, they stopped to rest the horses and eat some of the food Catherine had packed. They sat on a fallen log overlooking a vista of snow-covered peaks stretching to the horizon, and for a moment, despite everything, Samuel felt almost peaceful. "It is beautiful out here," Annabelle said quietly. "I never really saw the beauty before. When I came west, I was so focused on the hardship and danger that I missed what was right in front of me." "It is beautiful," Samuel agreed. "Hard and unforgiving, but beautiful. Kind of like life, I guess. You have to look past the difficult parts to see the good." She turned to look at him, and there was something in her expression that made his breath catch. "I am glad I met you, Samuel Winchester. Even with all the danger and fear, I am glad. Does that make sense?" "It makes perfect sense." He reached out and brushed a strand of hair from her face, letting his hand linger against her cheek. She leaned into his touch, her eyes closing briefly. "Annabelle, when this is over, when you are free and safe, I want to court you properly. I want to take you to dinner and dances. I want to show you all the good things this territory has to offer. I want a chance to make you happy. If you will have me," her eyes opened, bright with emotion. "I would like that very much. But only when you are ready," he added quickly. "Only when you are free of Marcus and have had time to heal. I am not going anywhere. I can wait." "You are a good man," she said softly. "Better than I deserve." "You deserve the world," Samuel said fiercely. "Do not ever think otherwise." They rode on through the afternoon, the trail winding through pine forests and across high meadows. The weather held clear and cold, and they made better time than Samuel had dared hope. By evening, they reached a sheltered spot near a stream where they could make camp. Samuel gathered firewood while Annabelle tended the horses, and soon they had a small fire burning. They ate cold biscuits and jerked beef, washing it down with water from the stream. The temperature dropped rapidly as night fell, and they huddled close to the fire for warmth. "Will we reach Austin in time?" Annabelle asked. "Before Marcus figures out where we went?" "I think so. We have maybe a 2-day head start, and we are taking a route he would not know about. Even if he guesses we are heading for Austin, he will probably take the main roads, which means we might actually get there first." Samuel fed another stick into the fire. "Once we get there, I am going to find the territorial marshal and turn over my evidence. Then we are going to find a lawyer and start working on getting you a divorce. What if Marcus contests it? What if he tries to claim me as his property? Then we fight him. The law is not perfect out here, but attempted murder is attempted murder. We have the testimony of what he did to you, and I am willing to testify about what I have seen of his character. We will make it work, Annabelle. I promise." She was quiet for a moment, staring into the flames. "I was so naive when I came west. I thought it would be romantic, adventurous. I thought marriage would be like the novels I read, full of passion and excitement. Instead, I got Marcus. Got beatings and threats and finally being left to die. I lost faith in almost everything. And now I am starting to believe again, in kindness, in honor, in love maybe." She looked at him, and her smile was small but genuine. "You gave me that, Samuel. You gave me hope. You gave me something too," he said. "Purpose. A reason to be better than I have been. For the longest time I have just been drifting, not really living. But meeting you, helping you, it woke something up in me. Made me remember what matters." They sat together in the firelight, shoulders touching, and talked late into the night. She told him about her mother, who had died when Annabelle was 12, and how she had tried to fill that void by being the perfect daughter her father wanted. He told her about the war, about things he had never spoken of to anyone, about the guilt and the grief he still carried. When exhaustion finally claimed them, Samuel spread out their bedrolls side by side near the fire. They lay under the vast canopy of stars, the fire crackling softly between them and the darkness. "Samuel," Annabelle said drowsily, "thank you for keeping your promise." "Always," he murmured. "Get some sleep now. We have a long day ahead tomorrow." But sleep did not come easily to him. He lay awake listening to Annabelle's breathing slow and deepen, and he thought about the future. If they made it to Austin safely, if they managed to stop the mining company and free Annabelle from her marriage, what then? Could they really build a life together? Could a Boston socialite and a drifting surveyor find happiness in this rough country? He wanted to believe it was possible. More than that, he wanted to make it possible. He would give Annabelle the home she deserved, the safety, the love. He would spend the rest of his days making sure she never regretted taking a chance on him. With that thought warming him more than any fire, Samuel finally fell asleep. The next 2 days passed in a blur of hard riding and cold camps. They made excellent time on the hidden trail, encountering no one except a trapper who nodded a greeting and continued on his way. The weather stayed clear, though the temperature dropped each night to well below freezing. On the 3rd day, they descended from the mountains into the valley where Berlin sat, a tiny mining settlement of maybe 24 buildings. They stopped only long enough to water the horses and buy some fresh supplies from a general store, then pressed on toward Austin. They reached Austin late on the 4th day, riding into town as the sun set behind the mountains. Austin was larger than Goldfield, more established, with brick buildings and paved streets in the town center. Samuel led them directly to the marshal's office, a solid structure on Main Street. Marshal Frank Garrett was a man in his 50s with gray hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. He listened to Samuel's story without interruption, examined the documents carefully, then leaned back in his chair and let out a low whistle. "This is explosive," he said. Silver Peak mining has friends in high places. Going after them is going to cause a firestorm. They are breaking the law, Samuel said flatly. They are destroying people's lives and livelihoods. Someone needs to stop them. And I agree with you, but we need to be smart about this. I am going to send these documents to Carson City by courier, someone I trust personally. I am also going to send a telegram to the territorial governor explaining the situation. But you two need to stay here under protection until this gets sorted out. If those men are still hunting you, Austin is not necessarily safe. What do you suggest? Samuel asked. I've got a house on the edge of town, used to belong to my deputy before he moved on. It is empty right now, but it is solid and defensible. You two can stay there, and I will have men watching it around the clock. Give it a week, maybe two, and we should have some kind of resolution from Carson City. It was not a perfect solution, but it was better than running blind. Samuel agreed, and the marshal took them personally to the house, which turned out to be a modest two-bedroom structure with a small kitchen and parlor. It was dusty from disuse, but it was warm and secure. I will have my wife send over some supplies, Garrett said. Food, blankets, whatever you need. You two stay inside and keep the doors locked. Anyone comes around who is not one of my deputies, you shoot first and ask questions later. Understood, Samuel said. Thank you, Marshal. Thank me by staying alive long enough to testify if it comes to that. Garrett tipped his hat and left, and Samuel heard him stationing a deputy outside before his footsteps faded into the evening. Alone at last, Samuel and Annabelle looked at each other. They had been running for days, sleeping rough, always watching their backs. Now suddenly they had safety. They had time, they had each other. We made it, Annabelle said, and she sounded almost surprised. We made it, Samuel confirmed. He wanted to take her in his arms, wanted to hold her and never let go, but he held back. She was still technically married. They still had obstacles to overcome. You should take the larger bedroom. I will be fine in the smaller one. Samuel, we have been sleeping side by side for days. You do not need to suddenly become proper on my account. It is not about propriety. It is about respect. You deserve privacy, a space that is yours. Besides, until we get you legally free of Marcus Zimmerman, we need to be careful about appearances. She looked like she wanted to argue, but then she nodded. You are right. I've gotten used to having you near. It feels strange to sleep alone now. I am just down the hall, he reminded her gently, and I will be here when you wake up. I am not going anywhere. Over the next few days, they settled into a strange domestic routine. Samuel helped clean and organize the house while Annabelle, under doctor's orders to rest her feet, supervised from a chair. Marshal Garrett's wife sent over not just supplies, but also furniture, dishes, and other household items, transforming the empty house into something resembling a home. Samuel found himself enjoying the simple tasks, the normalcy of cooking meals and mending fences and chopping firewood. He had spent so many years drifting, never staying anywhere long enough to put down roots, that he had forgotten what it felt like to have a place, to have someone to come home to. And Annabelle was there in the middle of it all, gradually healing, gradually coming back to life. She helped with what she could, cooking when her feet allowed, mending his torn shirt, filling the house with small touches that made it feel warm and lived in. They talked for hours, learning each other's stories, sharing hopes and fears and dreams. On the 5th day, they received word from Carson City. The territorial governor had received the evidence and was launching a full investigation into Silver Peak mining. Several executives had already been arrested, and more arrests were expected. The governor's letter specifically thanked Samuel for his courage and assured him that protective custody would continue as long as necessary. It is over, Annabelle said, reading the letter over Samuel's shoulder. You did it. You stopped them. We did it, Samuel corrected. If you had not needed help, if I had not stopped in that storm, those documents might never have made it to anyone who could use them. Everything happens for a reason, I guess. On the seventh day, a lawyer arrived from Carson City, sent by the governor's office to assist with Annabelle's situation. His name was Walter Chen, and he was young and sharp and full of ideas. I have been looking into Marcus Zimmerman, Walter told them as they sat in the parlor. He is wanted in 3 territories for various crimes, including fraud and assault. The governor has issued a warrant for his arrest. More importantly, I have found evidence that suggests your marriage to him may not be legal. Did you know he was already married when he wed you? Annabelle's eyes went wide. You mean to the other wives he mentioned? No, I mean to a woman in California who is very much still alive and very much still legally his wife. Which means your marriage to him is void. You are not his wife, Mrs. Zimmerman. You never were. The relief that washed over Annabelle's face was profound. Are you certain? I have the documentation to prove it. I will file the necessary paperwork with the court, but for all intents and purposes, you are a free woman. Zimmerman has no legal claim on you whatsoever. After Walter left, Annabelle sat in stunned silence for a long time. Samuel sat beside her, waiting, giving her space to process. I am free, she finally said, and her voice was full of wonder. I am actually free. You are free, Samuel confirmed. She turned to him, and there were tears streaming down her face, but she was smiling. You kept your promise. You said you would keep me safe, and you did. You gave me back my life. Annabelle, he began, but she stopped him by placing her fingers against his lips. Let me finish. You have been patient and respectful and so incredibly kind. You have never asked for anything from me, never expected anything. But I need you to know that I am not the same woman you found crying in the snow. That woman was broken and afraid. The woman sitting here now is stronger because of you. And she knows what she wants. What do you want? Samuel asked, hardly daring to breathe. You, she said simply. I want you, Samuel Winchester. I want to build a life with you. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep beside you every night. I want everything you offered me before, the courting and the future, all of it, if you still want me. Samuel cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing away her tears. I have wanted you since the moment I saw you, not just because you needed saving, but because of who you are. Your strength, your courage, your heart. I am yours, Annabelle, for as long as you will have me. Then, finally, he kissed her. It was gentle at first, tentative, a question more than a demand. But when she responded, her arms coming up to wrap around his neck, he deepened the kiss, pouring everything he felt into it. All the fear and hope and love that had been building since that day in the snow. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Annabelle was laughing through her tears. I think we should get married, she said. Is that too forward? I do not care. I almost died alone in the snow, and life is too short to waste time. I love you, Samuel. I want to be your wife. Yes, Samuel said immediately. Yes to all of it. I love you too, Annabelle. Have since almost the beginning, though I tried not to. You are the best thing that has ever happened to me, and I am going to spend the rest of my life making sure you know it. They were married 3 weeks later in a small ceremony at the Austin church. Marshal Garrett gave Annabelle away, and his wife stood as witness along with Walter Chen. It was simple and quick, but to Samuel it was the most important moment of his life. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, when Samuel slipped a simple gold band onto Annabelle's finger, he felt something settle in his chest. He was home. Finally, truly home. They stayed in Austin through the winter, making the little house their own. Samuel took work surveying for some of the local ranchers, honest work with honest pay. Annabelle, her feet finally healed, took a position teaching at the town school. She was gifted with children, patient and creative, and she loved the work. News came regularly from Carson City. The investigation into Silver Peak mining had uncovered widespread corruption and criminal activity. 14 men were arrested, including several high-ranking officials who had been taking bribes. The governor himself sent Samuel a letter of commendation and a reward of $500 for his role in bringing the conspiracy to light. Marcus Zimmerman was arrested trying to cross into California. He was brought back to Nevada to face multiple charges, including attempted murder, bigamy, fraud, and weapons trafficking. Samuel and Annabelle both testified at his trial, which lasted 3 weeks and ended with Zimmerman being sentenced to 20 years in the territorial prison. "It is really over," Annabelle said the day the verdict came down. They were sitting on the porch of their house, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and purple. "He cannot hurt me anymore, cannot hurt anyone." "It is over," Samuel agreed. He put his arm around her shoulders and she leaned against him with a contented sigh. "We can finally just live our lives. No more running, no more looking over our shoulders, just us and the future." "What do you see in our future?" she asked. "A ranch, maybe. Some land where we can build something lasting. A family if you want children. A life full of ordinary days and extraordinary love." He kissed the top of her head. "What do you see?" "The same," she said softly. "All of that and more. I want to grow old with you, Samuel. I want to sit on a porch when we are 70 and still hold hands and remember the day you found me in the snow. I want our children to hear the story of how their parents met, how you saved my life, and then gave me a reason to live it." "That sounds perfect." Spring came to Austin, and with it news of a ranch for sale about 20 miles outside of town. It was a modest spread, 300 acres with a small house, a barn, and good water. Samuel and Annabelle rode out to see it, and they both fell in love with the place immediately. The house needed work, and the fences were in disrepair, but it had potential. It had a future. They bought the ranch with the reward money and their combined savings, and they threw themselves into making it a home. Samuel repaired buildings and strung new fence line while Annabelle planted a garden and fixed up the house. It was hard work, but it was satisfying in a way that nothing else had ever been. Their first summer on the ranch, Annabelle discovered she was pregnant. Samuel was so overjoyed he picked her up and spun her around, despite her laughing protests. They spent the following months preparing, building a cradle, sewing baby clothes, choosing names. Their son was born on a cold January morning, exactly 1 year after the day Samuel had found Annabelle in the snow. They named him Thomas, after the rancher's son who had helped them escape. He was healthy and loud and perfect, and Samuel held him with trembling hands, overwhelmed by the love he felt for this tiny person. "You did good," he told Annabelle as she rested in their bed, exhausted but glowing. "He is beautiful just like his mother." "He has your eyes," she said with a tired smile, "and I suspect he will have your stubborn streak too." Life on the ranch settled into a rhythm. They raised cattle and horses, built up their herd slowly but steadily. Annabelle continued teaching during the school year, riding into Austin twice a week while Samuel watched Thomas. The ranch prospered, and so did their family. 2 years after Thomas came their daughter Rose, and 3 years after that, another son named James. The house grew to accommodate the growing family, sprouting an extra bedroom and then another. The barn was expanded, and Samuel built a proper fence around the property. They acquired neighbors, other families seeking a fresh start in this harsh but beautiful country, and they all helped each other through the lean times and celebrated together during the good. Samuel's surveying work led to a position as a county land agent, a respectable job that paid well and kept him close to home. Annabelle's teaching earned her a reputation throughout the territory, and she was eventually offered the position of headmistress at the Austin school. She accepted with Samuel's full support. Years passed, each one adding new memories, new joys, occasional sorrows. They lost Samuel's horse to old age and got a new one. They weathered droughts and hard winters. They attended barn raisings and church socials and 4th of July celebrations. They became pillars of their community, the couple everyone knew and respected. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Samuel took Annabelle back to the place where he had found her, riding up into the mountains through deep snow to that grove of pines. The tree was still there, ancient and enduring, and they stood together beneath its branches. "I think about that day sometimes," Annabelle said quietly. "How close I came to giving up, how easy it would have been to just let go and drift away into the cold. But you did not give up," Samuel said. "You held on long enough for me to find you, because some part of me knew you were coming, knew there was still something worth living for, even if I could not see it yet." She turned to face him, her green eyes bright in the winter light. "You were my miracle, Samuel. You and everything that came after. You were mine, too." He pulled her close, this woman who had become his whole world. "I love you, Annabelle Winchester, today and always." "Today and always," she echoed, and they kissed beneath the pine tree where their story had begun, the snow falling softly around them like a benediction. They had 3 more children over the following years, 2 more daughters and another son. The ranch grew prosperous, and Samuel bought additional land until their spread encompassed nearly 1,000 acres. Their children grew strong and healthy, learning to ride and rope and read and write. Thomas, the oldest, showed an aptitude for surveying like his father. Rose wanted to be a teacher like her mother. The younger ones were still finding their paths, but Samuel and Annabelle gave them the freedom to discover their own dreams. Samuel served a term as county commissioner and helped establish several new schools in the territory. Annabelle wrote a series of primers for frontier education that were adopted throughout Nevada. Together they built something lasting, something meaningful. As the years turned into decades, as their hair turned gray and their children grew up and started families of their own, Samuel and Annabelle remained as devoted to each other as they had been in those early days. They still held hands when they walked. They still kissed goodnight before sleep. They still found joy in each other's company after all the years. On a warm summer evening when Samuel was 62 and Annabelle was 54, they sat together on the porch of their ranch house, watching their grandchildren play in the yard. Thomas had brought his family from Carson City, where he worked as the chief territorial surveyor. Rose lived nearby with her husband and their 4 children. All told, Samuel and Annabelle had 11 grandchildren now and another on the way. "Did you ever imagine this?" Annabelle asked, reaching for Samuel's hand. "Back when you found me in the snow, did you imagine we would end up here?" "I hoped," Samuel said honestly. "From the moment I looked into your eyes, I hoped we might have a chance at something real. But this, all of this." He gestured at the scene before them, the house and land and family. "This exceeded my wildest dreams. Mine, too." She squeezed his hand gently. "You know what I think about sometimes? I think about how Marcus meant to kill me that day. He meant to destroy me. But instead his cruelty led me to you, led me to this life. I almost feel grateful to him in a strange way. His worst became my best." That is a generous way to look at it. It is the truth. If he had not abandoned me, we never would have met. I never would have known what real love feels like. Our children would not exist. All of this, she swept her hand to encompass everything, would not exist. So yes, I am grateful, not to him but to fate or God or whatever brought us together. Samuel pulled her close and kissed her temple. I am grateful too. Every single day I wake up grateful that I rode through that storm, grateful that I stopped when I heard you crying, grateful for every moment since. We had a good life, Annabelle said contentedly. We are still having a good life, Samuel corrected. We have got plenty of years left, you and me, plenty of time for more adventures. I have had enough adventures to last 3 lifetimes, thank you very much. I am content right here, watching our grandchildren grow, growing old with you. That sounds perfect to me. They sat in comfortable silence as the sun set, and the children were called inside for supper. The ranch hands finished their work and headed to the bunkhouse. Lights began to glow in the windows of the house. The smell of Annabelle's famous apple pie drifted out from the kitchen where their daughters were cooking. I kept my promise, Samuel said suddenly. The one I made in the snow, I kept you safe. I gave you a home and a family and a future. I kept my promise. You did more than that, Annabelle said, her voice thick with emotion. You gave me everything. You gave me myself. The woman I was always meant to be, the woman I never could have become without you. That is so much more than a promise kept. That is a miracle delivered. Then we gave each other miracles, Samuel said, because you saved me too. You just did not realize it at the time. As the stars emerged overhead and the cool evening air settled over the ranch, Samuel and Annabelle remained on their porch, two people who had found each other in the most unlikely of circumstances and built something beautiful from tragedy. They had survived danger and hardship. They had fought for their love and won. They had created a legacy that would outlive them, children and grandchildren who would carry their story forward into the future. It had started with a coat given in kindness and a promise made in snow. It had grown into a lifetime of love, of partnership, of choosing each other every single day. And as Samuel looked at his wife, still beautiful to him after all these years, he knew that he would make the same choice 1,000 times over. He would stop in that storm. He would give her his coat and his promise. He would fight for her and build with her and grow old with her, because some promises were meant to be kept forever. Some loves were meant to last beyond time. And the cowboy who had found the crying woman in the snow had discovered something more valuable than gold, more lasting than fame. He had discovered that the greatest adventure of all was simply loving someone well for a lifetime. Thomas called from the house that supper was ready, and Samuel stood, helping Annabelle to her feet. She moved a bit slower these days, her joints stiff from decades of hard work, but her smile was as bright as ever. Hand in hand, they walked into the house filled with warmth and laughter and the family they had created together. The door closed behind them, shutting out the night, and through the windows the glow of lamplight and the sound of voices raised in joy. The ranch would continue. The family would grow. The story that began in tragedy and survival would be told and retold by generations yet unborn. And somewhere in the mountains, snow still fell on that ancient pine tree, covering the ground where a woman had once waited for death and found life instead. Where a cowboy had stopped and given everything he had, not knowing it would lead to everything he would ever need. Where two souls had found each other in the wilderness and created a miracle that would endure long after they were gone. The end of one story. The beginning of a legacy. A promise kept, a love fulfilled, a life well lived. And that, Samuel and Annabelle would have agreed, was more than enough. It was everything.